The galaxy was burning, and everyone knew it. What had started as isolated reports from frontier colonies had become a nightmare that kept every species in the Galactic Confederacy awake at night. The Void Swarm wasn't just another hostile alien race. They were something far worse. Ambassador Kethvar's 6 arms trembled as he stood before the massive communication array on Confederacy Prime. His purple skin had turned pale blue with stress, and his usually pristine diplomatic robes were wrinkled from days of sleepless planning. Around him, technicians from a dozen different worlds worked frantically at their stations, their various appendages dancing across control panels as they boosted the signal strength to maximum power. The numbers were terrifying. 12 colony worlds had already fallen to the Void Swarm, each one stripped completely clean of all biological matter within hours. The survivors who managed to escape told horror stories that sounded like nightmares. Massive bioships that looked like they'd grown instead of being built. Creatures that seemed to exist purely to consume and multiply. And worst of all, they were getting smarter with each world they devoured. Broadcasting on all frequencies, Ambassador, said Chief Technician Yila, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence as she monitored the readings. We're reaching every known civilization within 50,000 light years. Kethvar nodded and activated his translator, knowing that this message might be the last hope for countless worlds. His voice carried across space, reaching species who had never spoken to each other, uniting them all in desperate fear. Any advanced civilization capable of military assistance, please respond. His translator crackled into the void, converting his natural harmonics into hundreds of different languages simultaneously. The Galactic Confederacy offers full citizenship, trade agreements, resource sharing, and territorial grants in exchange for aid against the Void Swarm threat. This is not a request for territorial dispute resolution or piracy suppression. This is a call for survival assistance against a galaxy-wide extinction event. The war room fell silent except for the gentle hum of equipment. Every species that could help had already been contacted directly. The Corelli had retreated to their fortress worlds. The mighty Zenthani had evacuated their entire outer rim. Even the warrior clans of Vectos had declared the situation hopeless and pulled back to defensive positions around their home systems. For 3 long solar cycles, nothing came back but the empty static of dead space. Kethvar barely slept, checking the communication logs every few hours. Junior diplomats brought him food that he barely touched. His aide, a young Faranian named Kik, kept updating him on the swarm's movement. They were getting closer to the core worlds. Soon, there would be nowhere left to run. The breakthrough came during the 3rd night, when most of the communication staff had finally gone home to spend what might be their last days with their families. Kik was monitoring the overnight frequencies when a signal came through from a completely unknown vector. Ambassador! Kik's natural clicking sounds rose to almost painful levels in his excitement. We have a response. Unknown origin, but they're using our diplomatic codes. Kethvar rushed to the communication station, so fast he knocked over a chair. The voice that came through was strange, using sounds that seemed almost primitive compared to musical tones most species preferred. But the universal translator worked perfectly, and the words were clear. This is Commander James Walker of the Human Defense Fleet. We received your distress call. Don't worry, we're already on our way. Estimated arrival at your coordinates in 72 standard hours. The communication room erupted in confused chatter. Humans? The database search came up completely empty. No records of first contact, no trade agreements, no diplomatic relations. They weren't even listed in the galactic census of intelligent species. Sir, Kik whispered, pulling up what little information their long-range sensors could gather. Their ships are unusual, very angular, lots of metal, no organic components that we can detect. An ambassador, they're moving faster than should be possible for vessels of that size. Kethvar stared at the sensor readings. The approaching fleet looked nothing like the graceful, living ships that civilized species preferred. These human vessels looked harsh, geometric, purely functional. They reminded him of the industrial equipment his people had used centuries ago, before they'd learned to grow their technology instead of building it. Should I contact the Confederacy Council? Kik asked nervously. Yes. Kethvar replied, though he wasn't sure whether to feel hopeful or worried. Tell them we have a response to our distress call, from a species called humans, from a system called Sol. As the night shift took over the communication stations, Kethvar couldn't shake a strange feeling. The Confederacy Council would probably laugh when they heard about these unknown humans with their primitive-looking ships. After all, if they were advanced enough to help, why hadn't anyone heard of them before? But something in Commander Walker's voice had been different, confident, almost eager, like he'd been waiting for exactly this kind of call. The galaxy was still burning, but for the first time in months, Kethvar wondered if maybe, just maybe, help was actually coming. They had no idea what they'd just invited to the party. When the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at Nexus Prime, every alien on the command bridge just stared. The sight that greeted them was something out of their worst nightmares. But apparently, the humans saw it differently. The Void Swarm bioships were swarming around the planet like angry wasps around a disturbed nest. These weren't normal spacecraft at all. They were massive, writhing things that pulsed with their own heartbeat, covering what looked like chitinous armor that grew and shifted as you watched. Some of the size of city blocks. Others stretched for miles, all connected by streams of smaller organisms that flowed between them like living rivers. Captain Zethkal, the Confederacy flagship, had seen these creatures destroy entire worlds, and his people were among the bravest in known space. His scales were normally a proud golden color, but right now they'd shifted to the pale yellow of pure terror. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with the mechanical precision of people trying very hard not to think about what they were looking at. All Confederacy vessels, fall back to minimum safe distance, Zethkal ordered, his voice steady despite his fear. Long-range bombardment only. Do not, under any circumstances, allow those things to make physical contact with your hulls. This was standard procedure. Every military academy in the galaxy taught the same lesson about the Void Swarm. You stayed far away. You used your longest-range weapons, and you never, ever let them get close enough to board your ship. The few times civilized species had tried close combat with these creatures, entire fleets had been consumed in hours. The Confederacy ships pulled back to what they calculated was a safe distance, roughly 500,000 kilometers from the swarm. Their weapons could barely reach that far, but at least they'd have time to retreat if things went wrong. Again, then the human fleet arrived, and everything the aliens thought they knew about space combat went out the airlock. Commander James Walker's voice came through the communications array with a casualness that made Zethkal's blood run cold. Confederacy Command, this is Human Defense Fleet. We see the situation. Thanks for marking the targets for us. Commander Walker, Zethkal replied quickly, recommend you maintain minimum safe distance of 500,000 kilometers. These creatures have boarding capabilities that exceed anything in our databases. There was a pause, then what sounded like laughter over the comm. Copy that, Captain. We'll keep that in mind. What the humans did next would be talked about in military academies for generations. Instead of taking position alongside the Confederacy fleet, they accelerated directly toward the swarm, not toward the edge of it, not toward the smaller ships. They aimed straight for the biggest, most dangerous bio-vessels at the center of the formation. Are they insane? Zethkal whispered, his scales now rippling with patterns of anxiety that his crew had never seen before. Commander Walker's voice crackled over the comm with what could only be described as enthusiasm. All units, weapons free. Let's show these bugs how we handle pest control back home. The human ships opened fire while still accelerating, their weapon systems completely different from anything Confederacy had ever seen. Instead of the precise energy beams that civilized species preferred, the humans used projectile weapons that threw chunks of metal at incredible speeds. Missiles that exploded in brilliant flashes. And things that looked suspiciously like nuclear devices, though surely no species would be crazy enough to use those in close combat. But the really shocking part came when the humans got within boarding range. Every sane military doctrine in the galaxy said this was suicide. The Void Swarm creatures would tear through any boarding party in minutes. The humans launched boarding pods anyway. Contact! Came a cheerful voice over the radio. This is Sergeant Mike Thompson with 1st Marine Squad. We're going hot, people. Zethkal watched his tactical display, in complete disbelief. The human Marines were actually fighting these creatures inside their own ships, hand to hand, close quarters. The kind of combat that had driven seasoned alien warriors to madness. And Thompson sounded like he was having fun. Multiple hostiles, close quarters. Thompson's voice came through the comm with something that could only be described as glee. Just like training, boys. Remember your urban warfare drills. The aliens watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as these humans treated a galactic apocalypse like it was just another day at the office. They rammed their ships directly into void biovessels, something that should have resulted in immediate assimilation by the swarm. Instead, the bio ships started breaking apart. "How are they doing this?" whispered Zethka's science officer, a brilliant Kellian named Dr. Fricks. "Their tactics violate every principle of safe combat doctrine." On the tactical display, human boarding parties were moving through void bio ships like they owned them. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for months were actually retreating from these strange new predators. Commander Walker's voice came over the comm again, calm and professional. "Confederacy Command, we've secured the outer perimeter. Moving to Phase 2 of pest control operations." Zethka realized his mouth was hanging open. Phase 2? They had phases for this insanity? As he watched the humans systematically dismantle creatures that had consumed 12 worlds, one terrifying thought kept running through his mind. What kind of world produces warriors who think this is normal? Dr. Rebecca Hayes was having the time of her life, even though everything she was discovering should have terrified her. While explosions and weapon fire echoed to the corridors outside, she sat hunched over her research station in the Confederacy Medical Bay, completely absorbed in the most fascinating biological puzzle she'd ever encountered. Her four eyes moved independently as she cross-referenced data streams, her tentacle-like fingers dancing across multiple keyboards at once. As the chief xenobiologist of the Galactic Confederacy, she'd studied thousands of species from across known space, but nothing had prepared her for this. The human volunteers had been incredibly cooperative, which surprised her. Most species were protective of their biological data, treating it as state secrets. But when she'd asked Commander Walker if she could run some basic scans to understand how humans could fight the void swarm so effectively, he just laughed and said, "Sure, document scan away. Fair warning, though, you might want to sit down when you see the results." She thought he was joking. She was wrong. "This can't be right," she muttered for the fourth time, running the atmospheric analysis again. Her equipment was the most advanced in the galaxy, calibrated to analyze any known form of life. But the readings it was giving her about Earth were impossible. "Computer, verify atmospheric composition of human homeworld designated Earth," she said aloud. The synthetic voice responded immediately. "Verified. Oxygen concentration, 21%. Carbon dioxide, 0.04%. Nitrogen, 78%. Trace gases include argon, neon, and methane." Dr. Hayes felt her stomach drop. 21% oxygen was toxic to most species in the galaxy. Her own people could survive in 12% oxygen maximum, and they were considered exceptionally hardy. Anything above 15% would literally poison their cellular structure. But humans breathe this concentration naturally every day of their lives. Their home world has an oxygen concentration that would be toxic to most species, she whispered, checking her math again. The gravity is 3 times galactic standard, and the native wildlife. She pulled up the files the humans had casually shared about Earth, treating them like tourist brochures instead of the horror documents they actually were. The pictures alone made her want to hide under her desk. Creatures called bears that could grow to 12 feet tall, and had claws that could rip through metal. Sharks that were basically living weapons with teeth designed purely for tearing flesh. Spiders that injected paralyzing venom into their prey. And that was just the big stuff. The microscopic organisms were even worse. Something called botulism that could kill in hours. Ebola that liquefied internal organs. Rabies that drove creatures insane before killing them. The list went on, but the really terrifying part was the planet itself. Dr. Hayes pulled up the geological records and felt her species' equivalent of a heart attack coming on. Earth regularly experienced what humans called ice ages, where the entire planet froze for thousands of years. Supervolcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for decades. Asteroid impacts that wiped out entire ecosystems. Magnetic pole reversals that destroyed the protective atmosphere. And the humans just lived there, called it home, talked about it fondly. Computer, classify planet Earth according to Galactic Confederacy habitability standards, she said, though she already knew what the answer would be. Classification, class, 12 Death World. Habitability rating, 0. Recommended for immediate quarantine. No known intelligent species capable of evolution under these conditions. Captain David Brown chose that moment to wander over, still wearing his combat gear from the battle outside. His armor was scorched and dented, with what looked suspiciously like void swarm biomatter splattered across the chest plate. He was munching on something he called a protein bar and seemed completely relaxed. "Finding anything interesting, Doc?" he asked, settling into a chair that groaned under the weight of his equipment. Dr. Hayes stared at him with all four eyes. "Your planet is classified as a class, 12 Death World," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing should be able to evolve intelligence on a class, 12 Death World. The environmental pressures alone should prevent complex civilization from ever developing." Brown shrugged like she'd just commented on the weather. "Yeah, Earth's pretty rough. But you adapt, you know? Had to deal with ice ages, supervolcanoes, asteroid impacts, mass extinctions. Really makes you appreciate the little things." Dr. Hayes felt like her world was tilting sideways. This human was talking about planetary extinction events like they were minor inconveniences, like they were just part of growing up. "Mass extinctions?" she repeated weakly. "Oh, sure," Brown said, taking another bite of his protein bar. "We've had 5 major ones that we know of. Probably more before we started keeping track. Wipes out most life on the planet, then everything starts over. Circle of life, you know?" She pulled up more data, her hands trembling. Earth had indeed experienced multiple mass extinction events that had destroyed 90% of all life on the planet. And somehow, through it all, the ancestors of these humans had not just survived, but thrived. "How?" she whispered. Brown looked confused. "How what? How did your species survive all of this? How did you develop intelligence in an environment that should have killed you 1,000,000 times over?" Brown was quiet for a moment, actually thinking about it. "I guess we just never learned how to quit," he said finally. "When something tried to kill us, we figured out how to kill it back. When the planet tried to freeze us, we made fire. When volcanoes blocked out the sun, we went underground. When meteors fell from the sky..." He paused, grinning. "Well, we're still working on that one." Dr. Hayes stared at him, and suddenly everything about the battle outside made perfect sense. The humans weren't fighting the void swarm despite being terrified. They were fighting them because nothing in their galaxy was more dangerous than what they'd already survived at home. These weren't warriors. They were survivors. And there was a very big difference. The reinforcements arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, and every alien in the command center felt their equivalent of a heart attack coming on. The second wave of human ships dropped out of hyperspace like they owned the place, and immediately the entire tactical situation changed. Where the first human fleet had been impressive in its own terrifying way, these newcomers brought something that made the Confederacy's military advisors physically ill just looking at the sensor readings. Admiral Patricia Kane's voice crackled over the communication system with the same casual confidence that seemed to define all humans. "Sorry we're late to the party, folks. Had to swing by the armory and pick up some of the good stuff." Captain Brown was still in the command center, somehow managing to look completely relaxed while covered in void swarm biomatter. He pulled up the tactical display and started explaining their strategy to the horrified alien command staff like he was discussing weekend barbecue plans. "All right, so we got 3 basic options here," he said, pointing at the swirling mass of enemy bioships with the same tone someone might use to discuss pizza toppings. "Option 1 is surgical strikes on their command nodes. Clean, precise, minimal collateral damage. Option 2, we glass the entire swarm with nuclear warheads and call it a day. Option 3, we board every single bioship and clear them room by room, old school style. The command center fell completely silent. Ambassador Kethvar's 6 arms were trembling so badly he had to grip his chair to stay upright. His translator was making strange clicking sounds as it struggled to process what it had just heard. Nuclear warheads? He finally managed to whisper. You mean weapons that actually split atoms? For military use? Captain Brown looked genuinely confused by the question. Well, yeah, what else would you use them for? We've had nuclear weapons for centuries. Started with the small ones, city killers, then worked our way up to the really big ones. He tapped his wrist device and a holographic display appeared, showing various weapon specifications that made several alien officers excuse themselves to be sick in private. Actually, we got some planet crackers in the fleet, if you really need them. Moonbreakers, too. But don't worry, we'll keep this proportional. No need to sterilize the whole system. Dr. Hayes, who had joined them from the medical bay, was staring at the weapon specs with the fascination of someone watching a train wreck. You develop weapons capable of destroying planets? She asked, her voice barely audible. Oh, those were accidents at first, Brown explained cheerfully. We were just trying to make bigger conventional weapons, and whoops, turns out if you make them too big, they start affecting geological structures. Live and learn, right? What happened next was something that would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations, assuming there was still a galaxy left to study it in. The humans didn't just coordinate their attack. They moved with a precision that seemed almost supernatural, like they shared some kind of collective consciousness. But it wasn't telepathy or advanced technology. It was something much more primitive and, somehow, much more frightening. They communicated through quick gestures that looked like they'd been developed over thousands of years of hunting together. Subtle facial expressions that conveyed complex tactical information. Body language that spoke of predators who had learned to work together, because anything less meant death. Sergeant Mike Thompson's voice came over the radio as his squad prepared for another boarding action. All right, people, remember your pack tactics. Jerry, you take point. Lisa, cover our 6. Bobby, watch for flanking maneuvers, just like we practiced back in the Colorado mountains. The aliens watching the tactical displays couldn't understand what they were seeing. These humans moved through void bioships like they'd been hunting in groups their entire lives. They anticipated each other's movements, covered each other's blind spots, and communicated with an efficiency that made advanced AI systems look clumsy, because, as it turned out, they had been hunting in packs their entire evolutionary history. Dr. Hayes was frantically taking notes, trying to understand what she was witnessing. They're not just using military tactics, she muttered to herself. This is hunting behavior, pack behavior. They've been doing this for millions of years. And that's when something unprecedented happened. The Void Swarm, for the first time in recorded galactic history, began to retreat. These creatures had terrorized the galaxy for months. They fed on fear and despair, growing stronger as their enemies became more terrified. Their entire psychological warfare strategy was based on breaking the will of their opponents, making them too scared to fight effectively. But the humans didn't seem to understand they were supposed to be afraid. Commander Walker's voice came over the comm as he led his ship directly into the heart of a massive biovessel. Target acquired. Moving to secure the central nervous system. This reminds me of that hunting trip in Alaska. Remember, guys? Same basic principle. The Void Swarm creatures were encountering something they had never faced before. Predators who treated a galactic apocalypse like just another day at the office. These humans fought like they'd been doing it forever, because on their world, everything had been trying to kill everything else anyway. As the swarm began its retreat, pulling back toward the outer system, Ambassador Kethvar made a realization that chilled him to his core. The humans weren't winning because they were more advanced or better equipped. They were winning because they were more dangerous than the things everyone else was afraid of. 3 weeks later, the last Void Swarm bioship limped into hyperspace, heading for parts unknown, and the galaxy collectively let out a breath it didn't know it had been holding. The aftermath was something nobody quite knew how to process. Nexus Prime, which had been written off as a total loss just a month ago, was not only saved but somehow in better shape than before the attack. The humans had done something that defied all military logic. They'd actually improved the planet's defenses while fighting off an extinction-level threat. Ambassador Kethvar found himself in the surreal position of updating first contact protocols while trying very hard not to think about the implications of what he'd witnessed. His 6 arms moved mechanically across his datapad as he struggled to find words that could adequately describe what had happened. How do you classify a species that treats galactic apocalypse like a moderately challenging Tuesday? He muttered to himself, deleting his 7th attempt at writing the report. The Galactic Confederacy had been saved by creatures from a death world, and somehow that was the least surprising part of the whole situation. What really kept him awake at night was how casually the humans had handled everything. They'd shown up, eliminated a threat that had terrorized the galaxy for months, and acted like they'd just helped a neighbor fix their fence. Dr. Rebecca Hayes wandered into his quarters, still clutching her research notes. Her 4 eyes were bloodshot from days of continuous study, and her usually pristine lab coat looked like she'd been living in it. "Kef, you have to see this," she said, spreading her data across his desk. "I've been analyzing the combat footage, and I think I understand why the humans were so effective. Please tell me it's something we can replicate." Kethvar replied wearily. "That's just it. We can't. Their entire approach to combat is based on millions of years of evolutionary pressure. They're not just warriors. They're collaborative predators who develop intelligence specifically to hunt more effectively." She pulled up a holographic display showing human squad movements. "Look at this. They don't need advanced communication systems because they've been reading each other's micro-expressions and body language since before they developed speech." Before Kethvar could respond, Commander Walker appeared in the doorway, looking surprisingly fresh considering he'd been coordinating a galactic defense for 3 weeks straight. His casual knock on the doorframe was somehow more unsettling than any formal military protocol would have been. "Hey, just wanted to thank you folks for the warm welcome," Walker said, settling into a chair that wasn't quite designed for human proportions. "We should probably head back to Earth soon, though. Got some climate issues to sort out, maybe work on that poverty thing. You know how it is." Kethvar felt his translator struggle with the casual tone. "Climate issues?" he asked weakly. Walker nodded like this was the most natural conversation in the world. "Yeah, we're slowly cooking our own planet with industrial emissions. Been working on it for a few decades now. Pretty standard growing pains for a young civilization, I guess. We'll figure out eventually." Dr. Hayes nearly dropped her datapad. "You're accidentally terraforming your own planet, and you're treating it like a minor inconvenience?" "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds bad." Walker laughed. "But honestly, it's not even in our top 10 planetary problems. We've got overpopulation in some areas, not enough people in others, a few ongoing resource management issues, some political stuff that needs sorting out, normal civilization things." The 2 aliens stared at him in stunned silence. Normal civilization things? Most species would consider any one of those issues a potential extinction event. "Commander," Kethvar said carefully, "how do your people remain so optimistic about such serious challenges?" Walker shrugged. "I guess when you've survived ice ages, volcanic winter, multiple meteor impacts, and a few near misses with nuclear war, you develop a pretty good perspective on what's actually dangerous versus what's just annoying." Through the window, they could see the human fleet preparing for departure. The ships that had seemed so primitive and angular when they first arrived now looked different somehow. Not more advanced exactly, but more purposeful, like tools that had been designed by people who understood exactly what they needed to accomplish. "Will you be back?" Dr. Hayes asked, and Kethvar wasn't sure she was hoping for a yes or a no. "Oh, probably," Walker said cheerfully. "We like you folks. Plus, now that we know there's a whole galactic community out here, we'll want to set up proper diplomatic relations, maybe some trade agreements. Our economists are going to be thrilled when they find out about interstellar commerce opportunities." As the last human ship prepared to engage its hyperdrive, Kethvar watched these terrifying Deathworlders who casually mentioned planetary disasters like minor policy problems. Commander Walker gave them a cheerful wave through the observation window, like he was just heading home from a successful business trip. The ambassador turned to his computer and began typing his final report. Recommendation for future first contact protocols. before requesting military aid from unknown species. Verify they are not apex predators from a class. 12 Death World. Some cures may be worse than the disease. Additional note: humans appear genuinely friendly and helpful. This may be more terrifying than if they were hostile, as it suggests their capabilities are currently being applied with considerable restraint. The humans disappeared into hyperspace with cheerful waves and promises to keep in touch, leaving behind contact information and an open invitation to visit Earth once we get the climate things sorted out. The galaxy was safe, grateful, and absolutely convinced they'd just met the most dangerous species in known space. And the humans thought they were just being neighborly.